Hi, I'm Pastor Tay of the Titus 2 Ministry and PastorTay.com. Welcome to Espresso. It's an interactive Bible study that is like Espresso, strong and smooth. Enjoy the taste. Good evening, marriage builders. I'm Pastor Tay, founder of the Titus 2 Institute. It is good to be with you on a Tuesday night. This is Talk Live Tuesday, and this has been our weekly conversation with you for about 3 years now. We're just very excited to come to you again tonight, and I know with so much that is going on around the world with the world crisis that this might be a challenging time, but I hope that you are well. If you're watching this right now, if you could please say hello, I will greet you right back. This is a live conversation, so you are welcome to drop your comments and your questions, and I will answer them in real time. Again, we're inside the page Titus 2 Marriage Builders, so it's all about marriage. And so we're going to get started in a minute, but I want to remind you of a couple things. And oh, by the way, do want to tell you or remind you that we have a YouTube channel called Espresso. And on that channel, we do archive all of these conversations. So you can go there and find them, or you can just stay right here and look at the Units tab. So if you're watching this on a mobile device, there is a menu tab called Units, and that tab is right above you on a mobile device, but it is to your left if you're watching this on a laptop or desktop. Go there and you'll find all the previous conversations archived there. In fact, they're organized into 4 major categories, because most of marital challenges and things can be organized into 4 major areas. They are communication, conflict, in-laws, and sex. Okay, so that's worked out real well for us to organize all of our conversations. And by the way, I'm not the only speaker, I'm just one of them, and you will find other good speakers there. And so communication is the way that you build a relationship. Conflict resolution can't pronounce words tonight. Conflict resolution is the process of fixing the marriage. In-laws, a lot of drama there, but it really is about marriage as well. So take a look at that unit category. And then sex, a very important part of marriage. So those are the 4 major categories. And what we've been doing for 3 years is we have been rotating. So for example, if we did communication 1 week, then the next week we go to conflict, in-laws, and sex, and then we go right back to the top of the rotation. And you know what? That has worked out really well, because if you go to the units, you will see that there is a real balance in terms of how many videos there are. A really nice balance, and so I'm just very, very pleased about it. So I don't expect you to always remember where we are in our itinerary, but we are right now in the 2nd major category called conflict resolution. And boy, is this a big one. It deals with everything from sin to forgiveness to anger to bitterness. I mean, go ahead and look at that category and you will see a lot of things there. So I'm just going to pick up where we left off in terms of this 2nd category on conflict. And where we left off was we talked about anger, more specifically the anger of the externalizer. Now, in my teaching, I've organized anger into 2 major expressions. There is the person that I call the externalizer, that's the nickname that I gave, where he or she is somebody who externalizes the anger. So, you know, you see it in the face, you see it in the body language, you see it in aggressive maneuvers, throwing things, pushing people, or, you know, yelling. In other words, it's all on the outside. Okay, so the externalizer. So go ahead and take a look at that. I think it's called Biblical Solutions for the Externalizer. Now, there's other videos there on anger, so you can, I think another one's called Do You Have an Anger Problem? So anyway, go ahead and scan down the unit category on conflict. You will easily find it. And so where we left off was on the externalizer, which means I'm going to now talk about the opposite style of anger. Both of those are, pretty standard. Externalizer, and then what would be the opposite of the externalizer? It would be the internalizer. So that's the second major style, and I'm sure you noticed that. And that's the person who's angry, but you don't see it, okay? Because this person's style is the very opposite. Now, this person is just as angry, but there isn't a lot of external expression. It's all happening on the inside. So tonight, we are going to focus on the internalizer, and this video will be called Biblical Solutions for the Internalizer. Okay, so let's get started. All right, so looks like a lot of people are busy tonight. I don't see anybody jumping in, but that's fine. It's very important for us to go through Talk Live Tuesday, and then when you do have time, you can access and be blessed by it. And when you do watch it on a replay, you are welcome to drop your comments and your questions, and then I will get back to you, okay? So let's get started. This is about anger, and this is about biblical solutions for the internalizer. All the anger is on the inside, okay? And so this person, sometimes I'll call her she, and sometimes I'll call her he does this, and just to spread the responsibility around. It's not always the man, and it's not always the woman. It's just, you know what? It's there are just a lot of people that are internalizing their anger. They're not showing it. And it might seem initially that it's better, okay? They hold it all on the inside. And I'll grant you that there's a little bit of something that's better in the sense that they're not breaking things or yelling. They're kind of holding it in and then going, getting out of the situation. And that I think there's a little bit of brownie points that come with that. But in the long run, there's some serious dangers in being an internalizer, okay? Although initially it seems really bad, but internalizers are like ticking time bombs. You know what I mean? It's all on the inside and it's building up, and eventually it will come out. So I'm going to propose that all external internalizers will eventually become externalizers. The most horrific example, and I'm not saying all internalizers are horrible, but I'm just saying there's some horrific examples in America with school shooters, the teenagers that shoot up the school, or to be fair, there's, shooters in the post office and other places. They go back to their workplace and take a gun and shoot. And my point is, how many times, all the time, when they interview people, what do they say? Oh, I can't believe it because he was so, quiet, never said anything, by himself, didn't have a lot of friends. And so what is it? He is an internalizer that eventually became an externalizer. And so all school shooters, postal office shooters, they're all, internalizers. And so I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, but there's a lot of truth to that. And so my point is, the internalized anger is a pretty serious problem. And so tonight, just for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, depending on if you guys jump in, okay, and ask some questions, we're going to offer specific help for the internalizer. And let me word it as a warning. So I'm going to speak directly to the internalizer, and I'm going to offer 3 biblical warnings tonight. You guys ready? Okay, take some notes and ask some questions. On the replay, you are welcome to ask questions and make comments as well. All right? So here's the first of 3. Number 1 is don't delay. Okay? You see, the style of the internalizer is to hold it inside, and kind of the process or the experiences, you're not letting it out right now. You see, the externalizer is letting it out. It's in real time, so to speak. But the internalizer is not in real time. Time just kind of suspends. Things are delayed. And so I'm going to say don't delay. Why? Because they're thinking, well, I'm not going to let it out right now. But time actually becomes her enemy, becomes his enemy. Why? because when you keep it inside for a long period of time, because that's the style of the internalizer, to keep it in there, okay, is that the anger grows. I talked about this in another video called Do You Have an Anger Problem? And it's the reality that sin grows, anger grows. You remember Cain in Genesis chapter 4? God describes to Cain that sin, specifically the sin of anger, is crouching at your door. And it's the description of a wild animal that's ready to pounce. And so, that's exactly what happened. There's a lot of teaching there, but simply put, the anger grew. So that's one of the great dangers. An internalizer is somebody that is more susceptible to the anger that is growing. Now listen, I'm not really letting the externalizer off the hook, but I'm just saying if you keep it on the inside, you are letting it marinate. You are giving it an opportunity to grow into something much bigger. Now, I also said, excuse me, in a previous video, I believe it's the same one I mentioned, do you have an anger problem? That there is the danger of the devil wielding his influence. That's Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's 20-something right there. And don't let the devil get a foothold. That's the verse there in Ephesians chapter 4. And boy, the internalizer is really susceptible to that because she is giving an opportunity for the devil to wield the influence. And again, watch that video that explains that further. So more susceptible to anger growing, more susceptible to demonic influence, okay? Not demonic possession, okay? Because if you're a Christian, you can't be demonically possessed because God is greater than any demonic possessing type of power, but there's definitely influence there, and that's why Ephesians chapter 4 talks about that. So we're still on warning number 1. I'm offering 3 warnings tonight. Don't delay, because the longer you delay, the more problems that is the internalizer, will have. I mean, we're talking all kinds of problems, right? Sin growing, demonic influence, your thinking gets a little distorted. I talk about that also in the previous video, how sin is delusional. Anger kind of messes with your mind, and so it's not good at all. In fact, it reminds me, being spontaneous for a minute here, of Hebrews chapter 3, verses 20-something. I should have looked it up and being spontaneous here, but it's the verse that says, well, as long as it is today, there's an emphasis there on daily visitation, because if you delay, and that's the style of the internalizer, right? Delaying, it says in there that the heart grows hard, okay? And so there's a great danger. So the internalizer is somebody where the heart continues to grow hard, and that's a very big problem when it comes to conflict resolution. Listen, this whole conversation is under the unit category, conflict resolution. And how hard is it then to resolve the conflict if you delay? Because the heart grows hard. So you got what? Anger growing, demonic activity, Ephesians 4, Hebrews chapter 3, the heart growing hard. There's a lot of things that happen if you delay, which is the style of the internalizer. So that's number 1. Number 2, and again, I'm wording it as a warning to the internalizer. Is that your style? You may think that, it's a little better or better maybe. I don't know how you're processing this, but better than the externalizer. Actually, think again. There are a lot of problems here with the style of the internalizer because a lot of things can go on as you stuff it inside and actually delay reconciliation. Number 2, the second warning here is don't pretend everything is okay. Now, this sounds a little strong, but I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to tell you straight, okay? The internalizer is a pretender. She's pretending everything's okay, okay? He's pretending everything is fine. And so, the internalizer is somebody who practices the half smile, kind of being calm and trying to hold it inside and pretending not to be upset, although she is seething on the inside. And so she's thinking, well, it's better than not letting it out. And I suppose you're not breaking anything, but the truth is, those half smiles and smirking and occasional snarky responses and different things are all just clues that there's a lot going on the inside. Okay. So I'm going to say, pretending, but maybe not even doing a good job, because a lot of people can see that the internalizer is upset. So this whole pretense, acting like everything is fine, is really a matter of dishonesty. And boy, Christianity is all about honesty, transparency, and being direct. Again, not being offensive, but being open and sincere and direct. And the Bible tells us to be that way, open and honest about our feelings. Tell me if you understand. I'm sure you do. In fact, Leviticus chapter 19, verse 17 says, don't hate your brother in your heart. Okay, so there's a verse for the internalizer. It's about the hatred and the anger that is in your heart. So don't pretend that everything is okay, because that type of pretense is going to lead to all kinds of other problems. Dishonesty, deceit, maybe even manipulation. You're doing everything not to show it. Lack of sincerity, insincerity, I should say. Okay. Leviticus 19, the second part of it says, don't hate your brother in your heart. Rebuke your neighbor frankly, so that you will not share in his guilt. Okay, so don't be afraid to raise the tough issues. People don't know, but the Bible actually has a lot to say about being very strong in your words, but with love. Because you know what? To be honest, can I just time out for a second? I just want to say that I think a lot of times we try too hard to be just nice, and we sugarcoat things, and we pretend everything's okay. And that's why people aren't growing. Okay, because nobody's speaking the truth. Nobody's telling it like it is. Listen, I'm not talking about being confrontational or being rude or, hurting people with harsh words. I'm not talking about that. But I am talking about being frank and being open and honest and saying what needs to be said without, a lot of hostility and anger. But if you let it pent up inside and pretend, when it comes out, it's going to come out in a very nasty way. So while it's still fresh and you're tempted to pretend, you know what? You need to deal with it. Okay? Address the problem. And that expression, honesty is the best policy. The internalizer needs to heed those words. Don't pretend not to be angry. That's the wrong policy. Let me share with you Proverbs chapter 27, verses 5 through 6, where it says, better is open rebuke than hidden love. Wounds from a friend can be trusted. You see that? So the person is not holding back, being open and honest, but it's done in love. Okay? It can be trusted because it's coming from a place of care. But if you were to hold it inside and pretend, and it can lead to all kinds of other problems. Drop a comment and tell me that you understand, and give me some examples of how it's done. You're talking about relationships that are not sincere. You're talking about continuing to pull off some sort of pretense. And listen, I don't want to pick on any gender. I don't want to say women are more prone to that or men are more prone to that. But in a marriage, sometimes, again, I don't want to say guy or the gal, but I want to say sometimes there's a lot of pretending going on. All right? You guys decide who is more guilty of that. But, a lot of time you pretend that everything's fine, and your spouse kind of senses that something is wrong and says, hey, honey, is everything okay? And she says, fine. Okay. Or the guy might say, oh, yeah, everything's fine, But it doesn't seem like everything's fine, because usually things are not fine. But the person, the husband or the wife, pretends that everything is fine. Sometimes it's a game, right? This is part of the pretense. You want your spouse to figure it out. You're thinking, well, if he loves me, he'll figure it out. Or if she really does care, she'll figure it out and say it to me. I'm just going to wait. And so you play the game. And that reminds me of Ephesians chapter 4, verse 25, where it says, put off all falsehood, okay, and speak truthfully. Don't say fine, Don't say sure, everything's okay, and then what? Put the pressure or give the evil eye. And of course, your spouse knows something isn't right. And they might say things like, okay, I'm going to go watch some TV. Okay, you said everything's fine. And then you get extra mad, right? Because you want your spouse to figure it out and then approach you, make the first move and say, hey, is everything okay? And then talk to you. But again, it's all games. Internalizer, whether it's the wife or the husband, we got to stop playing games, all right? I'm not saying the externalizer is any better. Just talking about the unique style of the internalizer that's often very complicated. Playing games. The anger's on the inside. You pick all kinds of pretending type games and might even say lies like, oh, everything's fine, don't worry about it. Or you tend to downplay the anger. Oh, no big deal, everything's fine. Or again, women and men do that at church too. Pretend that they are not angry at somebody and hug them and laugh and do all kinds of things when on the inside they're really, really angry, and then badmouth them when they leave. And so it's all pretending. A lot of that pretending goes on in workplaces, at churches, and even in the home. And so warning number 2 for the internalizer is don't pretend that everything is okay, because that smacks against everything that Christianity is about. Christianity is about honesty, openness, and sincerity, and treating people the right way, more directly and with transparency. And wouldn't you want that? Do you want to be on the end, or the receiving end, I should say, of manipulation and pretense? The internalizer, somebody's pretending to like you. I mean, that's just not right. All right. So anyway, we're talking about 3 things that are just not right with the internalizer. I'm expressing them as warnings to the internalizer, but you know what I'm doing. I'm offering biblical solutions on how an internalizer can deal with the anger. Here's number 3. And number 3 is don't keep a record of wrongs, okay? Because that's what the internalizer does. Doesn't show it on the outside, but she is keeping a record of wrongs. He's doing that too, if that's his style of internalizing. And so they're keeping an accurate record of what the spouse has done wrong. So internalizers are great accountants, right? Accounting for every word, every nickel and dime, so to speak, and just become certified accountants, CPAs of all the things, and just might even be bookkeeping for years. I mean, it's not uncommon for spouses to keep a record of all the violations for 10 years, 20 years. Think about it. How long have you held on to this? And oh, by the way, keeping a record of wrong is going to lead to all kinds of other problems, such as bitterness, holding a grudge, unwilling to forgive. I mean, there's just so much related to warning number 3. So don't keep a record of wrongs. That reminds you of a very well-known verse, right? 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 5. Love keeps no record of wrongs, because marriage is about love. Of course, Christianity in general is about love, but more specifically in marriage, it's to love and to hold, and love is the basis of it. And love is the greatest. And to hold a record of wrongs, live in the past. Wow, there's just a lot, right? Bitterness, grudge, living in the past, not forgetting, unable to move on, right? Because you're keeping a record of it. Related to this is, you know that expression, a mountain out of a molehill? Meaning when the issue is, when it first started, whatever it is, could be this small. But then if you are an internalizer, what's going to happen is if you keep a record of wrong over time, remember, and this takes into account how sin grows and how you let it marinate and grow, what happens is the little molehill becomes a large mountain. Mount Everest. Actually, how about Mount Vesuvius? Because that's a volcano. Because eventually what's going to happen is a little molehill turns into a large volcano and then eventually erupts. Because listen, I don't care who you are, an internalizer eventually becomes an externalizer, okay? So nobody is just a perfect internalizer able to hide it forever. There might be a few extremes, but most internalizers become externalizers, okay? So very, very serious. So let me look at the clock here. Oh, time flies when we're having fun. So I hope that this has been a good installment in our unit category called conflict resolution. I think this is our third teaching on anger. We had a general one that's called, do you have an anger problem? Take a look at that. That covers a lot of principles on anger. We had another session where it was biblical solutions to the externalizer. And so I'm feeling pretty good that we've added this installment, which is biblical solutions for the internalizer, okay? I hope you found it helpful. I hope you were able to consider the biblical principles, and I hope you consider just how dangerous it is to internalize your anger. So before we go, let's review the 3 warnings to the internalizer. Number 1, don't delay. Number 2, don't pretend that everything is okay. And number 3, don't keep a record of wrongs. All right, guys, I hope it's helpful. I know it will, as long as you continue the journey together and continue to watch and share these videos. And so anyway, I look forward to seeing you next Tuesday with another installment. And so again, we got 4 major categories: communication, conflict, in-laws, and sex, as we continue our journey of learning how to better the marriage with God's help. All right, guys, take care. Have a good evening, and I will see you next Tuesday.
Thanks for joining us for a devotional drink today. If you love Espresso, click here to subscribe so you know when the next one is ready to enjoy. Visit our website for resources for every chapter of your life. And if you're thirsty for more, click here. See you next time. May God bless your day.